We have been heavily conditioned by medicine, by religion, by psychology, by psychiatry, by society in general now, that pain is our enemy, that distress is not good. We have been heavily conditioned, and you can see it more and more and more problematic as generations come through now, into seeking comfort and pleasure and avoiding pain and distress. And the medical profession has a lot to answer for in this. The religious professions has a lot to answer for in this, because they all encourage pleasant states of living, pleasant states of being, which is completely unrealistic, because life is not always pleasant. And if we can't live with pain and distress, then we...
Matthew, welcome to the podcast. You became a monk for 10 years. Tell us what led you to that journey and what the outcome was.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Nice to be here, and hello, everybody. It was actually about 18 years old when I got involved with that approach to living. And so it lasted for about 7 years, actually. That's no big deal. It's just a few years. And during that time, the reason I became a monk was just because I was just interested in learning to meditate. And this is a long time ago now. It's like back in, the late 70s. So it's quite a while ago. And in those days, if you wanted to learn to meditate here where I was living in Australia, there wasn't really much available. So I just went to the first centre I could find and joined in on a course, and it happened to be a yogic approach to meditation and philosophy, if you like. And I just got involved. And once I got involved, I actually within a few months, I got quite entrapped in it in a way. I was very, very convinced by, this is really good. And I just decided to go full in. So I became a monk. And I left my girlfriend at the time, who I was living with, and which wasn't very pleasant for her and not very considerate, but that's the sort of person I was in those days. I tended to be very driven as a young man. And if I got a new direction, I would just move in that direction. And that was something that I suppose was convenient for being a monk, or worked well for being a monk, because a monk is very much a self-centered sort of existence. You're very, very much as a singular person. You're the only person you're really considering. And it's all about you reaching your self-realization or your enlightenment. So I'm not saying that as a self-obsession, but it's very much a part of being a monk, is that you are not really considering the existence of other people personally on an idealist, as an idea or as a spiritual practice you may be, but personally you're not that involved. You're only really involved with yourself.
Is that why you wanted to be a monk? Is that because of the fact that you wanted to just focus on the self at the time, and you felt that your desire to meditate and learn to meditate to a certain level, that you had to become a monk to be able to achieve that?
No, it was more, I wasn't, at that age, I really wasn't aware of that characteristic in me, of being a little bit disconnected and a little bit self-centered. I wasn't really aware of that. And it wasn't obvious to other people either. I didn't appear that way, that's for sure. I was a very friendly, very affectionate person in relationships and so on. But I had a type of drive in me. If I decided to do something, my focus would switch and I'd go 100% in with whatever I did. And I think it was just my characteristic, not so much something I was aware of. It was something that I just was like. And so it fit quite well with being a monk. And so I think that's probably why I found it so very, very easy to switch from a normal life of having a sexual relationship with a girl for a couple of years before that, and moving straight into a celibate life with living on my own or living with a group of guys, basically, a group of males. And it was okay for me. It was easy for me, but that opened up as time went on. Of course, 18 is very young. 18-year-old,
I was going to say,
you're pretty young.
Yeah, it's a very young age to become celibate and to really just focus on the self in that way. It's a huge decision. How did you go with like living as a monk?
Oh, I found it very easy. It was probably it was like a 7-year vacation, actually, and because your mentality was so involved in just what you're achieving spiritually or internally, that the material side of life was not a bother anymore. So it was quite an escape from the material realities of life, and the monastic environment provides that escape, because you've got that support. You've got that structure to a certain extent, at least, not fully, not completely. You still have to earn money or whatever. You still have to do certain things to survive, but it's a very distant, second focus. If primary focus is just on your development or theoretical development as a human being. So it was, and really, I mean, I'm just remembering back as we're talking, at that age, it really, a lot of it wasn't, none of it was really a conscious decision, like it was just like, I was going with the flow. I just went from one thing to the next, and I was pretty healthy in the sense of I hadn't been through any traumas or any problems much in life at all. I had a very cruisy life as a kid, and I was quite bold and fearless, like often an undamaged young person should be, and so I would just jump into anything as the next adventure, really, and that's how I lived, and I lived like that right up until I became a monk, and that itself was an adventure. But I had no idea what I was getting into. Obviously, it was just I think it was just completely a state of complete ignorance. My only interest was to learn to meditate, and just one thing went to another, and I basically took on the beliefs very rapidly, because I'd never come across anything like it. Being in Australia, I hadn't had a religious background. I hadn't had any beliefs at all about God or about, anything spiritual. None of those things attracted me. But they just weren't around me. I was a shearer, actually, in the bush, so,
wow.
so I was,
very different.
It was pretty different, I mean,
a shearer to a monk. Wow, what a headline.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, well, it was very different, yeah. So I suppose I'm trying to express the youngness and the naivety, but that's common when people, unless they grow up in a religious family, if they become religious in their adult life or towards their adult life, I think it's usually out of either a trauma-based drive for some help or some pain and suffering that they're not dealing with very well and they're looking for answers, or the other can be just simply naivety. Yeah, you don't really see what you're getting into, and you don't really care. You're just going on to the next thing, not really thinking much about it. But,
was that here in Australia that you were a monk?
It was here in Australia,
okay.
and also in India, and also I would, within a few years after being involved, I was starting to live in different centres around Australia, live in different monasteries, if you like, in Asia.
Yeah.
So just different places that I would stay. But generally, most of it was based in Australia.
Yeah. What were you seeking other than meditation? What were you seeking as part of becoming a monk? Was it a sense of belonging that you were looking for? What was it, do you think?
No, it was very clear at the time. I had um, a bit of an anger issue actually, because growing up in as a teenager, I was out in the shearing sheds by the time I was about 13, and so they're they're pretty aggressive, violent, physically violent um, environments, and a lot of alcohol, and you're very isolated, particularly out in the far north of Western Australia where I mostly worked. So it was very isolated, and a young guy just with a bunch of pretty rough but tough men. It was, you had to look after yourself.
Of course, yeah. You've got to be able to watch
So
your back, right?
yeah, we had to be able to stand up for yourself, and
Yeah.
I was able to for some reason. I was pretty wild, and so it wasn't really so much what I was searching for, but it's a very interesting question as you ask me. It wasn't so much what I was searching for. It was more what I was trying to find a resolution for, and that was I was tired of getting in fist fights, and I was tired of being a little bit explosive on the anger level when something wasn't right. And I had a a very heightened or hyperactive sense um, of fairness in the world, if you like, and I tended to be the person who looked after I'd be, as a kid at school, I'd be looking after the kids who were getting beaten up by bullies and that sort of thing. So I had a sense of what is fair and what is not fair, and I tended to stand up to the world, whatever I thought wasn't right. And that's, of course, just how I was at the time. But of course, as I grew, I found it became too aggressive. I became too aggressive. So it was just a reactionary state. And so becoming a monk, I was able to literally channel that. And I was looking for that. I was looking for something that would help dissipate that anger. So I wasn't really searching for a God or anything of that nature. And even it's the reason I said it was a very interesting question, because I have been asked that question a couple of times in my life, which sounds, and I remember it because it was always like a surprise. Like, the fact is, it always put me back on a feeling in myself that I actually never felt that I was ever consciously searching for anything at all. I was never really looking for anything. I was just sort of living and going with what was coming in front of me and just going to the next thing. So I wasn't much of a planner. But during that time as a monk, I did learn a lot about myself, not from what I was being taught in the institutionalized, ideals of the organisation I was part of. That was teaching me about their philosophy, their beliefs, which I took on fully, no doubt. But in the process of doing that, I experienced this. Now I'm thinking about just talking to you. This part of me which was tended to rebel against any type of outside-in conformity, anything that was trying to tell me or anybody else how they should be or shouldn't be. And of course, any monastic lifestyle is the most extreme level of mind control and indoctrination that I think exists, because you not only learn it from the outside, but you then apply it completely willingly to yourself. So you use techniques and the meditation techniques and the repetition of ideas and beliefs to indoctrinate yourself on a daily basis, not considering you're doing that. You don't realize you're doing that, but that's and eventually that indoctrination on myself, something sort of erupted inside of me within about the first 3 or 4 years. And it was a physical eruption where I started to, my body started to reject this, my body, not mentally. mentally I was fine, but my body literally started to reject this indoctrination that I was imposing on myself, and these constrictions that I was causing in my body by not allowing my natural sensations to be a part of my life.
So, when you, if I can interject there for a moment, when you
Yeah.
say constrictions, specifically, what are you referring to there?
Yeah, very good question. Very insightful question, really. Specifically, it's a constriction on everything that is natural to the human being and what it is to be in your natural state. So it's a complete overriding of anything natural, not just to sexuality through the celibacy, but you are never thinking your own thoughts. You are only thinking the thoughts that you are taught to think. You are therefore producing an experience of yourself that is the result of that way of thinking. And so this is a tremendous constriction on, one, the persona that you may have grown up with, that I grew up with, that basically disappeared. And then a constriction on any normal, natural, healthy, or any sort of sensations that drive us as an organism, as a living body, that didn't fit with the Puritan practices and ideologies of the monk.
So is that things like experiencing joy, anger, those sorts of emotions? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, for sure. This is very good. So, yeah, there's all these ideology within any religion, I think, but in that one as well, there's all these ideologies of virtue and vice. Yeah. So they divide the human being. The natural state of the human being is to be in the condition they're in, which I understand now, I should say. The natural state of the human being, of any individual, is to be exactly as they are. Because we're in that state due to what we've been through. And so that state is a perfect representation of what we've been through, and being in contact with that state is how you know yourself to be, and how you understand your own needs, whatever that state may be. If you've been harmed as a person and you override that harm, then you're just ignoring yourself. But if you're aware of that harm and you feel that harm in whichever way it exists inside of you, then you are responsive to that harm by the very fact that you are allowing yourself to be in, I don't know, an angry person, or a depressed person, or a sad person, or a frightened person. And that's a natural state. I'll talk a lot more about that as we talk today, for sure. And I'm talking now from what I understand now, whereas as a monk and in any religious belief, any belief system tends to, even just basic social concepts, divide the human state into what is acceptable, what is unacceptable, what is good and what is bad. And this is mostly, I would say, has come from thousands of years of religions, of different types of religion and belief systems that have tried to deal with the human condition by dividing it up into these good and bad states. Whereas this is I found later on, this is an entirely superficial view of the states, that they're not good or bad states. If a person is angry, or a person is frightened, or a person is self-centered, or a person is easily embarrassed or shy, this may be seen as problematic tendencies in a human being to function in the world. But to say that they are somehow wrong is a misunderstanding that these are the result of whatever the person has been through. And so these are a true representation of that person in that moment, at that point in their life. Not saying that these things, it isn't desirable to sometimes, with some of these things, like if you're very shy or very insecure, not saying that it's not desirable to resolve these things. But ironically, and I'll get more into this as we go on, the traditional approach from psychology through to all religious approaches is to condemn and try and be something other than the way you are, to condemn that way of being which you find is problematic, and to try and develop, pursue or achieve or become something better. And this is very, very strong in the whole enlightenment, seeking for enlightenment or self-realization philosophy, where you see yourself as being, this is an impure state of me. I must reach that pure state, as though one state is better than the other. And ironically, I have found through working with just tens of thousands of people all through my life, that, and also just my own journey of my being a human being, that it's the idea that something is wrong or right that is the problem, and that causes us to suffer that something more than the thing itself. So if I have a problem with shyness, then my dislike of judgment and criticism of that shy part of me, wishing to be another way, actually prevents me from ever experiencing that shyness in its pure form. So if I have an opinion or a bias about any condition in myself, I experience it through that bias. If I don't have an opinion about it, then I can experience it exactly as it is. So there's a difference between how we are as a human being at whatever point in our life that is, and our views of that.
Yeah, no, I'm hearing you. I was just thinking, though, that it seems to me that there's a pandemic of that, really, right across the globe. This thinking of that's wrong in myself, this judgment of myself or of others because of how they may emotionally react or how they may be. That seems quite commonplace to me.
Absolutely. And it's got worse. Yeah, it's become a bigger problem, and quite exponentially it's increasing, over the last year. Both of us are at an age now where we can actually even see within our lifetimes how from the last few generations how it's become a major problem. It's got worse and worse and worse, I think. Would you agree with that? Have you noticed the same?
Oh, for sure. I see it on a regular basis. I see it around me with the people that I work with. I see it amongst friends and family. You see it on social media. You see it in the geopolitical situation that we're currently going through globally at the moment as I suppose, an extreme example of that, of what we're discussing. But I do want to do a deep dive into this further, but I just want to bring you back to that moment where you felt that there was an explosion within yourself physically, or a rupture, or however you described it, and that pivotal moment, and what happened after that, because at some point you were kicked out of being a monk.
Okay, well done. Yes, so we'll do that one. No, it's very good. It's very good. It's important because because we're going to talk about some very serious stuff today, talking about trauma. So it's a good idea that we establish some sort of rapport or understanding in people, that I'm not just popped out of nowhere, that it's come from a lot of experience and a lot of understanding. So that wasn't so much a moment, and it's very interesting how you're talking to me. What I'm picking up in how you're talking to me is like there's this often a sense that a person, like for me in those days, as I was mentioning earlier, it wasn't so much that I was going along knowing what I was doing and having a vision towards the future of what I was wanting to achieve, apart from on the superficial belief systems of being a monk. But within me, there was still this tendency to be going along quite blindly and just living day to day. And in that way, when this change started to occur in me physically, I was still flat out trying to maintain. I was flat out still maintaining my persona of the monk, meaning I was still teaching, I was still guiding other monks, because for some reason I became very quickly part of the hierarchy, and I was guiding other monks and helping other people, even though I was only very young, 23, 24 years old. And I was teaching and I was lecturing in a public and so on. And so my role was that of a teacher in that organisation. And so I still kept up my meditation practices. I still kept up my studies, and I still kept up all the indoctrination of the practices that were involved in achieving the desired level of mental and mental purity. Really, I won't, not physical purity. That's easy; you just stop doing it. But mentally, it's more like the idea of not having. Say if you're celibate, you can stop having sex. But then the next step, which was I found very easy, was to not have a sexual thinking process. So you're not really relating to other people sexually, whether they're male or female. And this is not actually difficult. There's techniques and ideas that you put in place that simply suppress your natural state. Absolutely kill it. Absolutely suppress it and switch it off. And it's just what you can do with your thinking and your techniques. And I won't go into all that right now because it won't mean much to most people. But the result was that this eruption began, and it was happening mostly at night time. And so it was when I would go to sleep at night, or on the moment of falling into sleep, in fact, it was probably the only moment at which I dropped the control. One thing I will say about being in a mentalized or spiritualized environment, or an intellectual, even academic environment, is whether we're monks or whether we're lay people, we're still using thought to determine what we do all the time. So we're very much control freaks. We're very much controlling and containing what we are and making what we are fit into what we think it should fit into. And as a monk, we took that to extremes and developed all sorts of practices to make sure we succeeded at that. And so that pressure, although it didn't feel like pressure to me, it felt like fun. I was enjoying it because I was good at it. I did it easily. I was really good at it. So that was no problem. But a lot of people can say that. A lot of people can be in the corporate world, and that is fun because they're really, really good at it. But still 20 years later, they discover they've destroyed their nervous system or something.
No, it happens a lot.
Yeah, which happens all the time. So I'm trying to draw these parallels that there's not a lot of difference between the monastic life and the lay life, to be honest. We're still the monks seeking enlightenment, and the psychological process behind that is the same as the businessman seeking his next $1 million. It's exactly the same psychological process. So I don't really see a spiritual search or a material search as being any different at all when you bring it back to a psychological and what's driving it. And that is me, what I can get for me. And it's very, 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 it's no different. It's exactly the same driving force. So this sort of overcame me at a certain point where, back to what you're saying, when this process started to begin inside of me, this was not because of what I was doing as a monk. This process wasn't some Kundalini awakening or some superficial nonsense like that. This was actually something going on within the body being of me that I did not understand. It was an introspective outflow. It wasn't something that I was making happen. It was something that was like erupting out of the volcano of this body. And it was something that was very, very physical. So what happens when as you would know, as any human being's been around long enough knows, you'll know it in a minute when I say it, is when you impose anything on yourself, this creates a constriction in your body. creates tension. It stresses your nervous system. It tenses your muscles. It does all sorts of things. But the thing is, it has a constricting effect on the body, essentially. And this is what we can do with our thinking, with our goals, and so on. Now, by doing that to myself at the time, this created a type of pressure between what I was doing from the outside and what was trying to happen on the inside, which was this organism was just trying to be itself. And I didn't. This is all understood in hindsight. At the time, I didn't know what was happening, not at all. But what was happening physically was at night time, that constriction that I would apply through my daily practices and life as a monk, which is all a type of constriction, living up to certain standards and maintaining a certain state. The constriction was actually not okay. It didn't bother me as a monk, but as a human being, it was bothering me. As a living organism, it was bothering me. So when I would drop off to sleep, so the control would drop off to sleep. It would drop away. And what would happen is actually I found my body started to erupt with types of contortions. Once I fell into a sleep state, I was getting sort of stuck between that state between being asleep and being awake, not quite asleep, not quite awake. And my body would start going through these slight contortions, and basically it was the body breaking out of the constrictions that our thinking can put on us. And this is natural when we go to sleep anyway. The body relaxes and lets go of the stress. But in this case, it seemed to force my body into a change that was literally throwing out or dropping the tensions that held the information that made up the persona of the monk. I'll say that again. So dropping the tensions in the body determine how we feel as a person. What causes the tensions in the body is mostly what we think and what we impose on ourselves and what is imposed on ourselves from the outside. And that makes up essentially how it feels to be us in the end. Mm-hmm. So what occurred, this is all in hindsight. I didn't understand this at the time.
Sure.
So what occurred was that as I went to sleep, so those tensions started to drop away. But it was almost like the body, the natural state in me was breaking out of those tensions. And so over the next 2 years, this went on for 2 years. So it wasn't a sudden thing. And I didn't understand it, but it went on for 2 years. I didn't understand it. And as those 2 to 3 years maybe, it just got less and less and less extreme, but it was always at night time. It was always when I was, when I'd dropped all the controls and I was either sleeping or in that place between sleep and awake. And the body would simply it's going through a reconfigurations of the tensions within it that have been imposed there, the information, the literal constrictions that are held as information that change the way it is to be you, to be something that you're not really born to be.
At the time, so you said that went on for 2 years. When it first happened, did you not freak out about that and seek some help or ask some of your monk colleagues, fellow monks, about, hey, is this normal? What's going on here? Or go and see a doctor and, is there something physically wrong that might be happening? Am I having a stroke? Am I having a seizure? Did you not?
Yes.
How did you interpret it at the time?
Yeah. So
what was happening?
This is very interesting because, again, it brings in the nature of what I was as a human being anyway, which was rather than question what was happening and be frightened of it and try and do something about it, I was fascinated by it. I was interested in checking it out. So what was happening, I didn't feel it was in any way. My inherent feeling is, I don't know what's happening here, but it's not harmful. It's not doing me any harm. Yeah. And I felt it was just fascinating. And I also, I was used to certain transformations from being a monk and so on, certain less common transformations that don't necessarily show up so much in day-to-day life for people because they just don't have the time to put into themselves. Yeah, and so they don't get to the luxury to be able to let things happen. They got to always have themselves in order. And so, no, I didn't question it. I didn't worry about it. I didn't get frightened of it. And as it went on, and the changes in me were quite dramatic, and that was that everything that I placed importance on as a monk and everything that I was very skillful at in communicating about this whole philosophy to other people who were, involved in this, it all just started to fade away, literally fade away, as though something was changing in my brain. So the question is, well, did I have a brain problem or something that was causing this? I didn't have a brain problem, but what happens was what I learned afterwards was actually this information. The body was successful. Myself as a living organism was somehow successful in just shrugging all that off, in really getting rid of that stuff. And over the next 3 to 4 years, or the final 3 to 4 years, I just found myself less and less identified with everything that was going on there, to the point that it meant nothing to me personally anymore. So whenever I went to the discussions, or whenever I spent time teaching people, when I still played my role, but I was finding it actually started to mean absolutely nothing to me. And my interest in it just faded away until a point where I just walked out the door. Well, I was actually causing a bit of disruption. That's what you were interested in. That's right. I was causing a bit of disruption. I, of course, was talking to, so-called seniors in the organisation. And they, being of the belief systems they're in, they came up with some ridiculous nonsense like the spirit possession and that you were being taken over by other entities and so on. And that's their explanation for anything that they can't understand, is they just say, yeah, it's God, or it's a spirit, or it's something mystical and undefinable. And I knew inherently that they were talking nonsense. Even the fact that the way they dealt with people with extreme psychological problems was to give them an exorcism, or something of that, and to work to see it as evil spirit possession, and that you needed to either resolve that evil spirit, get rid of that evil spirit, or it's bad karma from a past life that you had to just put up with until it dropped away or it burnt away. Now, I've found since, and neither of those things, these are just mythical concepts to try and understand what they couldn't understand. And so I came to understand that this was just a change going on in my body, which is unusual and really, really lucky, because by the time I left being a monk, I was actually asked to leave, and I was, in a fairly abrupt way. And this is because I was causing a lot of trouble by simply, because I already had a teacher role, the things I started to talk on were way beyond what was within the boundaries of that whole belief system. And it actually went into the negation of that belief system. So all my talks became, let's take this a bit further, let's question this. And I started to very, very easily negate the belief systems of karma, reincarnation, purity, impurity, all the things that they believed in. That fact, whether you're a soul or not a body, and the mind, all sorts of things that they believed in. I started to break them down, not intellectually, but because as I went through this change, my whole way of viewing life changed with it. And it wasn't that wasn't from being a monk. That was actually because I was actually opposing the whole system by the time I was asked to leave. And it was having a bit of an effect on people. People were, because what I was saying was very original. What I was talking about made sense and was very original. And so it was coming straight out of me. It wasn't coming from the teachings. And so people became it caused a lot of disruption. And so in the end, they told me to leave. And that was fine because when I left, I was already gone. I had already left on the inside. And I no longer identified with that situation of being a monk. And that was very new. I actually left with I felt, all I really felt in the end was I was just there was nothing really remaining of this belief system and all the ideas about me as a person that I'd invented, or my parents that are invented, or anybody invented. All that really seemed to be there was, what was left with was a living body, a living, intelligent body that was super sensitive, and functioning mostly as a sensory being. So this was very, very, very free state, a very interesting state, because I found that when I came back into normal life,
What was that like?
That was, these are strange, these interesting things coming back to me. Because I remember I actually went to visit the girl that I left before going into becoming a monk. I went to visit her, and the question was, I said, you knew me 7 years ago. Can you tell me what I was like? Because I don't know who that person is anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And because I had no idea what I was like anymore. It was gone. So that was a bit interesting. And we had a couple of catch ups, and then that sort of faded away. I probably seemed like a bit of a fruitcake, probably, to her at the time, because I was asking very strange questions. That's where I was coming from. And she couldn't, obviously, it didn't really matter what she told me about it, still meant nothing to me. So I changed so dramatically that I wasn't really convinced by any ideas about myself that I'd had throughout my life or as a monk, because I was feeling something very different, that I was feeling very sensory. So I felt that was my state of being a sensory being. The sensations of my body, my sense organs were on high alert, but in a way that it wasn't like I can think. I mean, I was thinking, I was intelligent. It wasn't that problem, but I didn't have any sort of resistance to life. I didn't feel like I had any judgment of anybody or anything. Nothing appeared to me as either right or wrong. It just was as it was. It was just seeing things exactly as they are. So I found myself having a very fresh view of everything.
Did you become spiritually averse, though, as a result of not wanting to align with the doctrination of a monk anymore? And then as part of your movement away from that, you mentioned about spirituality, God, whatever anyone believes in. So do you believe in spirituality still? Do you believe in God? What are your thoughts now? What's your position on that now?
Okay. It's probably much the same as what it was when I left. It's just now I know what it is. Whereas when I left, I hadn't concluded in anything when I first left. Whereas as time unfolded, and I continued to work with other people, because I will go into that later. The question being, what actually happened for me also during that period of where I was meditating a lot as a monk. I was meditating 8, 10, 12 hours a day and not actually using the monastic approach at the end. I was just sitting still and letting my body do its thing. And so what I discovered was that, because that's a lot of meditation for anyone, to be honest, and in the sense that it was not applying a technique made it all the more significant to what I'm talking about. Because when you apply a technique, you entrap yourself within a limitation of what you're going to discover, and you're not going to discover much beyond the influence of that technique. When you don't have a technique, you open yourself up to what is inherently within you as a living organism. So you open yourself up to the introspective world of the human being that you are, which is generally completely on automatic pilot and not known consciously, cognitively to any one of us. The only hint we get of knowing it is the feelings that we have or the sensations that we have. yeah, or if your tummy gurgles, or something corrects itself, yeah. So, or how our body just does how it digests food. This is an introspective function of the body, of highly intelligent function, a very intricate function that we can't understand at anything but a very superficial intellectual level, but we could never duplicate it. It's happening at a level of intelligence that is far superior, in my view, to any academic or mental intelligence that we humans come up with. And so it's just amazing. And so I found that became more apparent to me, more in a way known to me, because I became so incredibly sensory. And what also became apparent is that our belief at the time was, and the experience was always, I did believe in God in a sense at the time I was a monk, and I did believe in, during that time I was performing exorcisms on people, and this is a type of, obviously I believed in the existence of spirits, and I communicated with spirits, and I was clairvoyant and all this type of thing going on. But what I discovered as this went on there's a lot more to this, and it's not what people think it is. That's what I've come up with anyway, and what I've basically not come up with. I didn't create this. It became apparent to me. And one thing, I'll use a typical example, is that if I'm sitting there meditating, without the idea, without the belief that I am a soul, without the idea that I'm a soul, and in that tradition they believe the soul is a point of energy, or a glow of energy. It's a yogic tradition. So some yogic traditions believe the soul is in the brain, in the forehead, in the brain. Other yogic traditions believe it's more down around the heart center, or it depends on the tradition. Essentially, they're all looking for a center, and depending on their beliefs, so they experience it to be what they believe it to be. Depending on their belief, they experience it to be where they believe it to be. So when those beliefs completely drop away, meaning if you're sitting there and you're not using your beliefs, you're not re-indoctrinating that belief into you, as the belief or the idea itself drops away, so the experience of whatever it is you believe in drops away with it. So what I discovered was that even to the point of believing I had a mind, and that there was such a thing as a mind, or a spirit, or a soul, this completely changed into, that was only something that I experienced with thought. Yeah. If I didn't have that idea or that concept or that belief, I did not experience I didn't have that experience. Yeah. And so I found that the whole spiritual and mentalized experience was an addition to myself as a body that was only accessible or experience, something you would experience when the idea of it existed. And when the idea of it didn't exist, it didn't exist, because it was no more than an idea. Now, this is a pretty big thing to say. So this led me into, what was I left with? I couldn't negate the body. I negated everything else, but the body I couldn't negate, because it actually literally is there. I couldn't negate the living experience of myself. When I use the word body, I don't just mean some material object, but this living being of me. I couldn't negate that. That is the existence of me. There was nothing I could do to negate that. And that,
is it energetically, you mean? So you're saying when you talk about the body, you don't mean about the physical being. So are you referring to the body as in a form of energy? Is that how you're viewing the body?
I'm viewing the body in exactly the same way you or anybody else views the body, and including in that exactly what you and everybody else feels as well, because everybody has all different levels of sensations. When you think about having an emotion, would you say that is a physically tangible thing? I don't think so.
No.
Not too much so, yeah. Or when you have, so you have different frequencies of experience, if you like, yeah, yeah. When you so as the living being that we are, we have different frequencies of experience. When you get frightened and fear is there, certainly it's a physically based experience, but there's something sort of ethereal about it as well, yeah. Or when you feel warm and fuzzy, it is a physical. It's always got to be physical, because it's not something separate that can exist separate to the physical, but it's still part of the whole being of you. So this is full on. What I'm trying to say is that what I've discovered is there actually is there's a materialist view, there's a spiritualist view, and the spiritualists might want to identify with themselves as being a body of light, and the materialists will identify themselves as being a solid piece of matter, okay, or view the body, the being of themselves in that way. So the spiritualists might be more akin to having more mental, visual, light-based experiences, and the materialists may have more solid, grounded experiences. But the view is determining those experiences a lot more than they realise. And so what I say is, whether you have the spiritualist view of yourself or the materialist view of yourself, you're both viewing the same thing, if that makes sense. You simply are looking at it in a different way.
Different lenses, maybe.
Different lenses. And so different lenses. And the lenses are the lenses of perception. Yeah. But what you perceive is not changed by your perception. It's still whatever that is. So life is something that my sense of myself as a body, living organism does not exclude anything that the spiritualist would experience. It doesn't exclude anything that the materialist would experience. It's just that I don't separate those two things. What I discovered is that separation is a thought-induced condition. Yeah, it's actually that separation, and I would go so far as to say that separation is, I would go so far as to say, it's the fundamental problem of the human species and the fundamental reason for mental and physical illness.
And it has informed a lot of the work that you do today, and in particular the work that you do around trauma and helping people with moving through trauma. And so let's fast forward to that, because I think that's really important for us to unpack. Yes. You say that trauma is not what happened, but what the body is still holding. Can you unpack what that really means in practical terms?
Okay. Did I say that? That's cool. Okay. What happens to us is harmful, yeah, and it is traumatic when some violence happens to us. That leaves our own experience of that, yeah, because the trauma comes to an end at some point. The physical act of being harmed comes to an end at some point. But then what are we left with is, if, for example, if it's childhood sexual abuse, then generally the child is left with no cognitive memory of the event that took place for various reasons. But the fundamental reason that I found is because shock is a big part of trauma. And when we go into shock, what is that? It's a physical shock, but it freezes our thinking process. So we stop thinking about what just happened. And that shock has such an effect that we even stop feeling what just happened for a while. We're just left with the feeling of shock. But over time, all that remains frozen or forgotten is the cognitive memory. And what becomes more and more a part of our living experience is the felt memory. So the felt memory is the trauma. The felt memory, trauma exists in the human being as the way it makes them feel, as the way it's left them feeling.
So physically, you're saying when you're talking about the felt trauma, it's the physical sensation that you're referring to there. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a physical sensation.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a physical sensation of fear, of terror, of revulsion, of disgust, of shame. So every so-called psychological state that we can label is actually the feeling in a body. Yeah. So not everyone, because there's so much additional psychological nonsense out there, but there's hundreds and hundreds of psychological conditions that don't exist, that are claimed to exist, that don't actually exist. We'll get into that later. But the actual condition that you feel yourself in is the memory that never goes. The condition that you're left in is the memory, the physically felt memory that never leaves a person until they heal that, until they actually heal that. So trauma is not really a psychological condition. The psychological condition of a person who's been traumatized, I would say anyway, is merely the symptom of trauma. So because you've been traumatized, so a child who's been sexually abused, when they grow up and they're trying to have a normal sexual relationship, then the sexual contact will trigger the memories held in those parts of their bodies. And triggering the memory means it triggers the sensation. It triggers the feelings that they felt when they were being abused as children. And so in this way, it interferes with their ability to be able to enjoy the sexual contact with in a healthy adult relationship. It's just really basic what I'm saying. And I think anybody who's been abused gets that from their own experience, is that it makes life harder in so many different ways. Because when we come into contact with life as we go on, as we grow up, even, we an older child, you become a teenager, and we find that we're just not the same as other kids, that we feel like something's wrong with us, and we have behaviours that annoy people, and we have fears that other people don't have, and we have disabilities, difficulties in concentration, difficulties in understanding things. So the trauma, it decreases our capacity for academic intelligence because we're so consumed by pain, by the feeling of distress that we live with, that we were unable to engage as much in life on the outside in every way. Not in every way. Yeah? So it really inhibits a person. So the trauma is a felt memory in the body, but the thoughts, words, and actions that come out of that felt memory are the expressions of that trauma, are determined by that trauma. So you'll find yourself behaving in ways that you don't want to behave or that you have no control over, or that is harmful to other people around you, not because you're a bad person, but because you've been treated really badly at some point, and probably many times. And having been treated really badly, you're left with nothing more than the felt memory, but not the cognitive connection to what the hell that was.
So there's that almost this amnesia in the body that you're referring to there. So why do so many people struggle to access the origins of their pain and not remember what happened to them?
This is a really big question and a really good one. Yeah. So we have been heavily conditioned by medicine, by religion, by psychology, by psychiatry, by society in general now, that pain is our enemy, that distress is not good. We have been heavily conditioned, and you can see it more and more and more problematic as generations come through now, into seeking comfort and pleasure and avoiding pain and distress. Yeah. And the medical profession has a lot to answer for in this. The religious professions has a lot to answer for in this, because they all encourage pleasant states of living, pleasant states of being, which is completely unrealistic, because life is not always pleasant. And if we can't live with pain and distress, then we are, and if we're encouraged to only have pleasure and seek pleasure and comfort, then we remain an incomplete person and an immature person. When I say immature, I mean we're not allowing ourselves to mature, to grow into a fully formed adult. And what I mean by a fully formed adult is an adult eventually works out that life isn't Romeo and Juliet. It isn't the fairy tales. It is actually pretty hard going at times. Yeah. And so if we don't know how to deal with that, or we have been trained into, and a society makes it acceptable for us to do anything to get rid of the pain, to suppress the pain, to drug it out, to cut it out, to suppress it through psychotherapy, to modify it through drugs, to manipulate it through plant therapy. Anything we try to do to change the condition we're in is a reaction to that condition. If that makes sense, is a reaction to that condition. Why are we reacting to that condition? Partly because it's a socially acceptable thing to do, and it's trained into us to do it, I believe. Yeah. There is no understanding of the real nature of pain and the necessity for pain, the healthiness of pain. There's literally no real understanding of that in the world, or it's very rare, very, very rare. Yeah. There is inherent tremendous, on top of that, there's why people don't gain memories is, yes, when it's trauma, this is much bigger than just what I've talked about there. But I wanted to start with that, is that generally as a human being, we do not understand that pain is a sensation in our body, and it is a language of our body to inform us, to guide us, and to keep us on track, and to control us in a way, control how we behave in a way when we need to relax, when we need to back off, when we need to slow down and be rested. And what do we do with all that? We just override it. And we override it by disconnecting from, in overriding it, we disconnect from it more. And so we're gradually more and more disconnecting from the body that we are and everything that the body is communicating in its own right. Yeah. And everything it's trying to do to keep itself healthy and to keep itself alive, but also everything that it's always doing to recover from the effects of life. Now, in medicine and psychology and religion, we think we can take that over. We're smarter than the body, and we're going to take over. And we haven't succeeded. We have failed dismally. Yeah. I know we don't have comparisons of the past to see that, but I'm just saying that. Yeah. That the way we deal with pain, the way we deal with illness, we are not healthier as a result of our medical profession. We are way, way sicker. Yeah. And we are not more sane as a result of 100 years of psychiatry and psychology. We are batshit crazy in comparison. We are really declined in our mental health. We can say there's lots of other reasons, but what I'm saying is these modalities are not making a scrap of difference to that decline. So
there's certainly been an increase in mental health issues
exactly
over the past many years now.
Exactly. So if there's been an increase, we've got all these skills at hand, Why is there an increase? And I'd say flat out, because they don't work. Why aren't they working? Fundamentally, because they're trying to make people feel better. They're trying to suppress the pain. They're trying to change the condition the person's in, rather than understanding the condition the person's in. And understanding the condition the person's in includes understanding the significance of that condition and how that condition is not there to harm you. It's there to finish where it began. So if you're traumatized as a child and that gets frozen and that gets lost, you lose contact with that, then you can't really, the body can't do anything with that much. You can't, the processing of that is locked in.
Can't close it out.
It's closed it out, yeah? So the processing of that is not continuing.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no more conversation about it, natural conversation. I'm not talking about analysis. I don't think analysis is healthy. But I'm talking, I don't think psychoanalysis really is very healthy at all on its own. But there has to be some of that, of course. But we really need to come back to the felt condition of the person to get in touch with what we're dealing with and what we're healing. So why aren't we doing that? Because our whole fundamental problem is we're trying to feel better. We're trying to not be in the condition we're in. We're trying to reach a state as a human being, which fits in with utopia, saying there is no illness, there's no sickness, there's no suffering. And this is unrealistic. And this is also giving us an aversion to those things rather than, well, what is this suffering? What is this illness? What is this pain? And learning from that to understand that and to live with that and to see what that's got to show us. And so, as I was saying, with that approach, what happens is a child is abused and that abuse is still in there, or at any point we're hurt, that hurt is there. It can't process if it's locked away, if it's locked into a frozen state within us. Yeah. But it does process once we make contact with it again. The interesting thing is when we make the right contact with it, it does process. But what is stopping us making the contact? And what I mean by with it, I mean by the feeling of it. Because the problem, I might want to emphasize, the ailment is a feeling, is the felt memory in the body. The ailment is not the psychological symptoms of that. Yeah, so working at that level, you're not going to help at all. You need to actually get back to what's inside and held as a memory, as a felt memory of the event in the body. And that feeling is where we begin to heal and process the impact of the shock, the impact of the terror, the impact of the horror of any event, particularly traumatic events. But still with your question, I'm getting there, I know, is that why we find it so hard to do that is because we have this mentality that's built up that's against anything that's painful or harmful. And we, as a person who's been traumatized, I would like to explain that in order to explain why we can't get there. When I use the word trauma, I don't just mean, the word trauma is pretty broadly used nowadays. It's become a bit of a thing, and essentially to me, it's losing its use. So I want to determine what I mean by trauma, simply so that I can use that word to communicate something. Because right now, it's not communicating anything clearly. It's very vague. Trauma is a point at which something is so horrific, so outside the scopes of what we're naturally designed to experience as a human organism, something that's so unnatural, so horrific to the individual that they cannot comprehend it. It doesn't fit with any aspect of what it is to be them. It's so overwhelming that they freeze. They shut down. They shut down cognitively and they shut down at a felt level as well. So it's so overwhelming that the body simply shuts down.
Assumedly, that's because they're going into protection mode, right? They're trying to protect themselves from the pain of the trauma.
Yeah. And survive.
Yeah.
Survive. The body's just doing what it's supposed to do. It's going into absolute survival mode. It cannot process this intensity of information. You know, a 3 or 4 year old child being raped by a fully grown adult cannot process that on any level, I find. Yeah, they can't process that on any level. So it's like overload. It's overload. You know, it's something never experienced before, or even doesn't matter whether it's been experienced before. It's an experience that can never be processed. It can be processed, but not by the child. Yeah, it's processed, but it shuts down, and therefore that trauma. A trauma is something, I would say, which you no longer remember cognitively, but you still have the effects of it in your life. Because the effects, you cannot suppress those. You cannot shut those down. So to me, I define trauma as a state where, a point where something is so overwhelming that the person goes into denial. And in denial of it ever happening. And this is another thought process on top of what's just happened, for sure. And that a person can do that at any age in their life, any time in their life. But we were talking childhood trauma, but it's typically with the child, yet, and even with the adult, yes, we can shut down cognitively, but we cannot shut down at a feeling level. If we shut down and go into a numb state, that is still the effects of trauma. Yeah, we're still in the effect of the trauma. We're still changed from what we were before we went into that numbed out state. So some people say, oh, but you're numb out. You're not feeling anything. Yes, you are. You're feeling numb. You're feeling the freeze. So you cannot escape the feeling. You cannot get rid of the feeling that remains after you've been traumatized. So you will be changed and you'll feel different, but you won't know why. And so this is, you won't know cognitively why. So I prefer to define trauma as that, not just, I've got a fright or, I banged my head, I've been traumatized. I know there's other traumas. You have a trauma to your leg. This is another area which I want to talk about. But for the purpose of this extreme abuse type trauma, this is something we do to really protect ourselves and survive. Otherwise, I think, quite honestly, for a child, I would expect that sexual abuse of a child would kill it. The child would die. But they don't. They suppress. Yeah. So it's very much a protective mechanism. Yeah. Now, why do we have such resistance, to retaining? Why is it so hard to recover our memories? And why do we have such resistance? Is because of the memory itself contains the feeling as well. So we have a tremendous resistance to the feelings that were the most horrifying, the most frightening, and the most damaging in our life. So the feeling, as soon as we start to feel a bit of the presence of our pain or our distress, even on a day-by-day level, what do? We distract. We look for something else to do. People say, I can't meditate. I can never make myself meditate. I can't sit still. Why can't you sit still? Why can't you meditate? So I can't meditate. It's not that they can't meditate. What they're really saying is, I can't bear to be in my own company. Because just underneath the surface of the idea, I'm going to go and meditate now, is a feeling of what they find very difficult to be with. And that feeling is what often wins over. And you go, oh, I don't feel like it now. And they distract into doing something else, again from that feeling. So the feeling of their pain is constantly driving them to look for something else to do as a distraction from the pain itself. So inherent in that trauma is a reaction to the trauma, and the aversion to it, the natural aversion to it, and the fear and the terror and everything that comes with it. You automatically, what do you do when you're frightened? You want to get away from it. What do you do with terror? You want to get away from it. So what do you do with any distress is we tend to have an aversion to it. But with extreme distress, we have a lot of trickery that goes on in our thinking that distracts us from being still with our discomforts. And why can't people recover memories easily? Because the memory is not just what people think. In a true disassociated state of trauma, you have literally split yourself in two. And so for a man or a woman, a grown man or a woman who's been sexually abused, for example, and has not recovered from that, has not recovered the full memory and the healing of that, or has not recovered the memory of that, that memory still exists inside of them. And they know that because they feel like shit.
Yeah, but it's locked away.
That's locked away, but they still feel the effects of that, yeah? So that memory's still there, but what they don't realise is that memory is like now, because they've split and they've lived there, they've grown up into an adult, but a part of them hasn't. And the part of them that hasn't is the parts that are still an intense part of them, and a persona in its own right. And this is where we have split personalities, multiple personalities in people, is because there is a split between what they can cope with and what they can't cope with. And as you grow up into an adult doing your best to cope, the child doesn't grow up with you. A healthy child does because it's not locked away. But so inside of a person who's been badly traumatized is in virtually every case that I've come across, and that's a hell of a lot of people, by the way, many, many thousands of people, there is a trauma persona in that person. And this is hard for people to understand. Lay people, people who aren't educated in this stuff find it very hard to understand. Even people who are educated in it don't really get it. What they don't understand is a persona is nothing more than a story about yourself. Yeah? And the story about yourself that's positive often exists very separately to the story about yourself that's negative. And when you become really negative and down, you lose your positive self. Where is it? It's gone. Yeah. And vice versa, when you get overcome by your positivity, you where's my negativity gone? It's disappeared. And so it's to take that to a multitude of extremes, where a person actually has a number of memories, and I'll say a number of memories, one or a number of memories of being abused. There is a persona there made up of that experience. It's not truly separate to the individual, but it is existing in psychological separation. It's been rejected. And we continue to reject that as we grow up. And so why is it so hard to find that? That is so locked away behind a lot of denial, a lot of resistance. Oh, that never happened to me. Oh, my father's a lovely man. You create a whole new story about a predator to avoid the reality of the fact that they're a predator, just to exist as a child because you're dependent on that child, on that adult for your survival. So, for example, so you have one persona that's got this beautiful story of mum or dad or whoever it is, and you have the reality of mum or dad. And the reality of mum or dad is not of mum or dad when they're different, when they're abusive. And so this is something that's really poorly understood by therapists across the world, is that this separation occurs and there will be no contact between these two parts of ourselves. Maybe an example of that would be helpful, and that is, there's a lot of examples out there, but one that comes to mind was a professor of psychiatry in your area over in the eastern states, Middleton, Dr. Middleton. I don't know if you've heard of him or not. He's fairly well known. But he was saying that literally hundreds of cases of known pedophiles come to them on a regular basis, and the children who are involved never come forward. But the most encouraging for understanding of this was there was a case of some over 30-year period where a pedophile had abused, documented the abuse, videoed the abuse of 300 children or thereabouts. And over that, and not one of those children, when those children were approached as children, not one of them, not a single one of them had anything to say about that. Not a single one of them remembered it.
Wow.
Okay? Not 90%, not 50%, but 100% had nothing to say about that. And even with therapy under this particular man being helped to recover their memories, I mean, he's got videos, so it made it pretty probably a lot easier, yeah? But to help them recover their memories, he still worked with these people through their teenagers up until early 20s, adult life, or some of them. I don't know exactly how many. This is a report. And even though he helped them recover their memories as their children under his care, by the time they're adults again, they're saying, I don't know if that really ever happened. And so what I'm saying there is that this split personality, this split in the personality, is not easily recoverable from.
Why do you think that so many traditional therapy models fail people when it comes to that type of trauma healing?
Because they don't understand that it's not about the mind, this so-called mind. They don't understand that it's not psychological. They don't understand that it's essentially physical. And they don't understand memory. And this is a very good point, actually. They don't understand what memory is and where memory is in the human organism, in the human being. And if you don't understand what memory is, and you don't understand where memory is, how are you supposed to treat memory? Because that's essentially what we're treating.
Yeah. So you're saying that thinking can't heal what thinking never has access to, essentially.
The access to the memory. No, thinking can heal behaviourally to a certain extent. So you can modify your behaviours through psychotherapy or through your own, for different therapies, you can modify your behaviours, you can modify the way you deal with your condition. But that's not the same as healing your condition. So your behaviours are psychological. Mm-hmm. They're the symptoms. But the condition itself is physical and felt as a memory in the body. So what Go on.
So I was just going to say, are you saying that the mind is the wrong entry point to healing?
Yes.
That it's got to come through the body?
Yes, exactly. This is the same with religion, with meditation, with psychiatry, with medicine. Everything that we're doing as human beings is top down. We're always trying to resolve problems from the outside of the problem. Yeah, we're always trying to resolve problems and understand life from the outside. Science is based on this. Science is observing the problem. That's why science will never, ever understand the human being. They understand mechanically, but they won't understand the human being, because you can't understand the human being that way. The only one way to understand the human being is to be one, and to really be that human being. Well, that's what I'm saying. So the medical approach of, or the typical approach of trying to work out a problem mentally, because that's where it's showing up. Yeah, it's showing up in the symptoms of a person. What I'm saying is that we have to flip this upside down, and that's what I've done. That's what happened for me as a monk. I flipped it upside down. Like, oh, hang on. Everything begins as a sensation in the body, and the thought process is just a result of that. And the information flow into words and actions is just the result of the information firstly being held in the body, remembered by the body. All information, not just trauma. Yeah. So memory is held in the body. It's not understood by people that what we're dealing with is memory held in the body. And so we have to access how that memory is in the body. So if I ask you, how is your memory existing? How is your memory of your trauma, or how does your memory of your trauma, or if it does, how does it exist now, or how did it exist? And where did it exist? In what form? How does your memory of your trauma exist in you?
I think, gosh, for me, let me think on that. Probably the wrong thing to do. Think on that. We're saying it doesn't come from the mind, right?
That's all right.
Yeah, because I've spoken about it before, that I've been sexually abused when I was younger, and I've been in domestic violent situations as well. So you definitely feel it in the body for sure, right? It's definitely there. You try to compartmentalize it, which is what you've been saying.
Yes, okay.
But for me, the way I dealt with it was to try to understand the people who inflicted the trauma on me as to why they did the things that they did, so that I could try to find forgiveness in that way, so that I wasn't holding on to that trauma in my body. I wasn't having to feel that trauma in my body anymore.
The trauma of blaming them, or the trauma of what happened to you?
Probably both, because I was very angry for many, many years. Very angry.
Angry with them.
Angry with them, and just perpetually angry.
Perpetually angry.
Yeah. You know, and probably not even being conscious of it at the time, right? And I think that's how it probably manifested in my body, that through the emotion of anger. I suppose as I got older, I became aware of that fact, that I seemed to be angry all the time, and I needed to do the work to try to figure out what was causing that anger, and really dig down and feel back to those times where I had that trauma inflicted upon me, so that I could try to heal myself from that.
You said to feel back. Is that what you did? You felt back. You felt your way back there. Is that what you're saying? Or
to a certain degree, I think. I mean, there was obviously a thinking component to it
of course,
as well.
Of course, yeah.
Because
there's nothing wrong with that.
No, you're trying to understand, why did that happen, and how could I prevented it from happening? What drove that behaviour? But I knew that I was carrying it in me physically as well, because of the way I was feeling at the time as an adult.
Yeah.
And so I needed to be able to let that go, right? And really, and for me, it was about releasing the anger. And once I learned how to release the anger, it became so much better for me. I don't get triggered by it anymore, or rarely, I should say.
So when you say releasing the anger, how did you do that, you reckon? How would you say you did that? It was hard to remember.
As I said, it was really about understanding the stories behind the people who inflicted that trauma on me.
Okay. So you came to terms with it mentally
Yeah.
as well.
Well, I wrote about it. I'm a writer, so I wrote about it.
Yeah.
And that was very cathartic for me to be able to do that.
So when you say it's cathartic, that's very good. As you're writing about it, very cathartic, was that a storm of emotional?
Oh, boy, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So
the tears were flooding.
and not just anger.
No.
Okay,
no.
good. So you've cracked the anger, then you've gone ahead and done something very unusual, like is to write about it. Yeah. I would say unusual that people were so determined, to heal themselves as you were. Or it seems to me you were.
I was.
So through that process of writing, you've obviously, when you said cathartic, you've felt so many massive amounts of sensations and distress.
Mm-hmm. And it was at times like I was choking. It was like this heaviness. There were floods of tears.
Yeah.
At times I'd have to get up and walk away from my computer and do some breath work, and just sit with what I was feeling, because it would become so overwhelming that I couldn't see to be able to write, because that, of how I was feeling at the time of all of that surfacing back up again.
Good. That's huge, isn't it? So
yeah, it was huge. Yeah,
that's huge. So you have you've accessed your own healing process.
I suppose so.
So go on.
No, I was just going to say, I suppose I have, because I feel so much better for it.
And that which was happening from you, you didn't do anything deliberately to make that happen, did you? You just started to write your book.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
I just started to write about it, and as a result of writing about it, remembering it, the feelings of those moments resurfaced again and just came flooding out.
Yeah. Good. And so you through that process of writing about it and so on, you've reconnected more deeply with yourself. Yeah, you're fully focused, and you've accessed the felt memory. Yeah. Now, and once you've accessed, and you kept accessing, as you've accessed the felt memory, would you say that had a life of its own as it came out?
For sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is how the body heals. You give it a chance, and that's what it will do.
Yeah.
So you give it a chance, and that's how the body will heal itself.
Yeah.
And what happens? Go on.
I was just going to say, because you were speaking earlier about the split personalities, and I think that was my split personality. The angry me was over here, and that was the way I was dealing with that trauma. And then there was the other me that was over here. And I think when we look at this type of trauma, this unresolved trauma that I was experiencing, and how that impacts our relationships and our behaviors, and even the kind of conflicts that we repeatedly attract. Because of that anger, I wasn't afraid of conflict. I would actively seek it out. It'd be like, you're going to have a go at me? Come on, take it on. I'll have a go at you, right back at you, kind of thing. So I know that some people would turn around and maybe become more shy, become more reserved, or, because everybody deals with their trauma differently, where with me, it was the other way around. I became much more assertive, more angry, probably more aggressive, in terms of if anybody ever tried to, do something wrong by me or mine. I remember being in a supermarket once with my grandmother, who's since passed away, and she was lining up to pay for her groceries, and this huge guy who was a bikie came through and just completely barged past and nearly knocked her over, and turned around. I said to him, hey, mate, I said, what are you doing? I said, you can't do that. I said, apologize to my grandmother. I said, you just barged right into her. And he turned around and started, abusing me and swearing at me and going off at me, and thinking that, there's this small woman who's, she's going to shy away from this. And I did, and I went straight back at him and started abusing him back as well. Not necessarily proud of that, but I suppose a lot of people would have run away from that or just shied away from it, where for me it was, I'm not going to take that abuse, mate. I'm not going to allow you to abuse my grandmother either. So, back off kind of thing.
Yeah, that's good. So the anger, once you got past the anger, you softened. And once you soften, then the real hurt starts to come out. Yeah?
Yeah.
Perhaps.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does, because I went then and had conversations with those people that had inflicted the trauma.
After that, yeah. So you knew of that trauma, and this trauma, is that right? You had cognitive remembrance of that trauma. Yeah,
I did. Yeah.
Okay, and having cognitive remembrance of that trauma, you were angry about what had happened to you. It wasn't like a mystery to you. Yeah.
No, so I knew.
Okay, so this is not really what I mean by a split personality. Yeah.
Okay.
Because all of that was known to you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All of that you knew. You were pissed off. You were angry.
Yeah.
And you knew what you were angry about.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? Is that true?
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. Right. Yeah.
So a person with a split personality they'll have that anger, like you had, but they have no idea why they're angry. So there's no memory of being abused. There's no connection with being abused. So it's really, that's really cool. So it shows therefore you've healed something huge, but you've managed to heal something there, which bloody hard to do, and you did bloody hard to do because of what you're going through, all those feelings you're going through. But it was what was coming out of the body, because that was the essential question at first too. But that doesn't matter because we're going to really good stuff. What's coming out of the body is coming out of the body. What's coming out of you is coming out of the body, not coming out of some thought process. So, because we don't feel anything in our thinking, the word sad doesn't contain the feeling of sadness. They're separate things. You might think the word, I'm really sad, and feel sad as you say it. But really, the sadness is something that exists in your body as a feeling. It doesn't exist in your thinking. The word can't. So thoughts don't really capture the lived experience of what they describe. That was this is not a distraction, but so it's more like you had a feeling process going. Your thinking was triggering that, yeah, and that's understandable. But the anger that would have been in you as a little girl or a teenage girl, whatever you were at the time, would have been pretty huge anyway. Once you realised, once you realised what had happened to you and that was wrong, then that would allow you to feel the way you honestly felt. But before you realise the way, I'm just picking up something, but before you realised that it was wrong, were you able to feel angry?
Before I realised it was wrong, was I able to feel
a period where you hadn't realised it was wrong, where you were a bit confused about it?
Yeah. The two incidents of when I was a child, yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. And do you know, were you able to feel anger then or just confusion?
Fear and confusion.
Fear and confusion.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. And you still knew about that though. That was something you still knew about. Yeah. So once you realise how wrong it is,
that's when the anger surfaced.
Yeah. Which is good, because that feeling is there. But when you understand once you get to a point, as a child doesn't necessarily understand what's happened to it, but you've got to the point you understand what's happened, and then you get pissed off. Yeah. Even if you're only 8 years old. Yeah. Then you get angry. So
the adult in me was absolutely incensed when I thought back on it. And then particularly when I found out that it had happened to someone else that I know as well, that was close to me, by the same person. That made me super angry as well. So I think that's kind of, when the anger really really got triggered.
Really got triggered. Yeah.
But
So
how do you work with people to resolve this? So if we think about the fact that there are some people who go through this type of trauma and they don't remember the
Yes.
trauma, but it's manifesting in a certain way, whether it's physical through relationships or something else, but they know something's wrong, but they don't quite know what it is. You work with a lot of people in trauma, so how do you pin that down and how do you help them heal from that?
Yeah. So as we just discovered in you, then we're not talking about a split personality in you, right? So, and it's become, so that makes it more clear. That's good. Yeah. So yes, you were angry. Yes, you were this, that, and the other. But when I'm working, but that's, you're conscious of all of that. When I'm working with people who have the split persona where they've lost that memory, then you're really only working with a person who will be physically ill. They'll have chronic fatigue. They'll have chronic illnesses. Anything chronic is trauma, and easily resolved through my approach. Easily in the sense that the reason it's there is because they're disconnected from something in themselves, and that disconnection creates it creates the problem itself. There's a big problem with that. So how do I deal with that is highly sensitively, of course, has to be very sensitive, but to begin with is the person understands that they have their feelings a certain way. Now, that feeling that they get in touch with is the key, not their thinking, not their story. Because if they come to me and I'm pissed off with my husband, or I'm not enjoying sex, it's like, okay, that's the symptom, but that's not going to help me uncover the problem. Actually, not really. I don't really need the story to uncover the problem, because the story is can be playing out in a lot of different ways in their life. Essentially, the story coming from the same cause. So the cause being, we're talking again about a person who's been sexually abused. So a person who's been sexually abused, again, their thinking is not their memory. Yeah? Their thinking, and even with you, the anger is the hurt that's coming out of you when you were doing that book. That's your memory. What you're writing in your book is seen as memory. That's actually the description of the event, and that's typically seen as memory, but it's not really memory. That is dependent on the felt memory in your body. So the felt memory in your body is where the memory essentially is, from which you draw on to form whatever your thoughts are. When you split from that, you can't put those two together. You can't put your thinking and your feelings together. I'll come straight at it now. So how do we deal with this? Is whatever a person is feeling distress, their pain and their distress, this is the key. And for anybody listening, wherever they find they hold pain or distress, or have chronic pain, chronic illness, they have distress when they're having sex, they have fear around the opposite sex or the same sex, depends. It won't really matter. It depends on who's abused them. So they have fear around people. Then all these things are happening and they don't know why. But that is the key into the rest of that memory. That's the tip of the iceberg, that way of feeling. And by reattuning with that feeling, finding where that feeling mostly is present in your body, and being with the feeling of that is the first step that's your first connection with your past. That's your first connection with your memory. And generally, every traumatized person already has that going on, but they don't recognize the significance of it. Yeah. And the therapists they go and see don't recognize the significance of it in most cases. They don't realize that there is the pain, there is the trauma, and how we're going to heal that is not trying to get over it or think our way out of it, but like you experienced when it was coming out of you as the writing was happening, that was your healing. That was really the healing of the trauma. That was the trauma coming out. Yeah. What you did is, in a sense, self-therapy, which was great. Yeah, well done. Yeah, but it was like, and that would have been, that's great. But those thoughts were the result of those feelings. Those thoughts, that what drove you to write the book, what drove you to go there, was because you were still incredibly distressed. And once you, I would suggest, but you can correct me, yeah. But once you resolve that distress, you have no more driving force to write another book, for example. Once that distress is gone, it's now just academic. You can remember what happened to you. If you fully healed it, you remember what's happened to you, and you don't have any remaining pain associated with it. But that's you don't have to be fully healed. You're healed enough. There will be some remaining pain associated with it. No, that's okay. Yeah. So that pain is still there in a person who's relatively healed or first comes to me. Yeah. So when they come to me with that pain, they know they have some pain. They know that has some condition, and it's in their body. And it's in their body that I bring the attention. So this is what I need people to do, is to feel what's happening in that part of their body and feel the sensations in that part of their body. You had something to query. That's a very good
I was just thinking about how people, or how you help people differentiate between different types of pain in the body, because I'm assuming that not all pain would be necessarily linked to trauma. Perhaps that's an incorrect assumption. But how do you distinguish between trauma fragments from genuine intuition?
There's no need to do that. If you have pain, you need to heal that pain. Yeah. So that will become clear as a result of healing that pain. So trying to, it's almost like what you're suggesting there is the outside-in approach that most people are still conditioned into. We're turning this around to the inside-out approach, where we start with the sensation and let that reveal the information on a cognitive level. So at that point where you've got pain and you don't know whether it's from this trauma or it's just from this event in my life, you don't know what it's from. What you do know is all you need. What we need is what we currently know. So we currently know that I have pain in my stomach, let's say. I have pain in my stomach. I currently know I have pain there, and by feeling it as it is, as opposed to reacting to that and thinking about that in a way that's based in fear and upset with it, I just let my stomach be the way it is. Let my stomach be, in a sense, welcome, but not necessarily liked. Yeah, I don't have to like it because it hurts or it feels, or it might be fear. You don't know. Yeah, whatever it is, you don't know what it is. But whatever the sensation is, you might not like it, but you allow it to be there. In allowing that pain to be there, and this does take a little bit to understand how to work with yourself to make sure you do this, but we're getting there. To allow that pain to be there and just feel it as it is in your body, as in a sense, this is your meditation. This is your direct contact with what you need to be feeling anyway, because the only other thing you're going to do with a feeling like that is avoid it, numb it out, or suppress it, or drug it out or something, yeah, or distract. So take away those options because you're not wanting to distract, you're wanting to heal. Take away those options of distracting or numbing it or drugging it out. And we're left with, okay, I have this pain here. And this is the language, the most predominant language of the living organism is distress, pain or distress. And that language that draws all your attention to that. Yeah, it makes you physically aware of that. It's not so important to be mentally aware of that. This can still be a disassociated state to think about the pain. What I'm saying is be physically aware of it. Yeah? Let yourself feel the way you feel from within the feeling. This will take a little while for some people for it to click, but I'll help with that as time goes on. So as we talk, now you're feeling that, and that if it's just pain from some stress you've been through today, you'll be feeling that, and that will dissipate.
Right. I suppose that's what I was trying to get to before, is that how do you differentiate between the types of pain that is linked back to trauma that you, as you were highlighting, that you need to sit with and feel, as opposed to, oh, I've kicked my toe and it's really bloody hurting, or whatever it might be, or I've got a migraine and it's because I pulled a muscle in a gym or whatever it might be.
Okay, this is good. Still, to avoid the pain of an injury is not necessary, but we do that because we have an aversion to pain that exaggerates our experience of pain to suffering. So if I injure my back at the gym, which I've done heaps of times, because we do, I don't want to not feel that, because I need the feeling of that to govern my actions, my activities, whilst that part of my injury, that injury is healing. Yeah. And not only that, but that being an area that I've injured, feeling that, and this is the part that some people won't find logical at first, is I want to know what information was in there that I actually was to some extent disconnected from that part of my body to be able to injure it.
Okay. So that there's something that may have been simmering there prior to actually injuring it, and the action at the gym may have triggered that into an injury, but perhaps there was something simmering there still.
Yes, but I'll make it logical. Probably is that. I mean, you work out, I think, don't you? Yeah, I think you work. Yeah, so you know what it's like when you work out. Yeah. Now, if you're really connected in your body and you're feeling all of your body as you're doing an exercise, then you will know at the point that it's enough, or you'll know at the point where your posture is not quite correct or your technique is not quite correct. If you're a bit disconnected or distracted or worrying about something else and you go and do the same thing, they're the times you'll tend to injure yourself, because at that moment you're slightly disconnected. So it is actually where that disconnection from what we're doing right here and now means that mentally we're disconnected, but physically, obviously, we're not. But mentally, we're disconnected, distracted, and that tends to be when things go wrong. But the reason we're often mentally disconnected from a particular area is because that's where we're holding stress that day. Already something has stressed us, something has bothered us, and we're just a little bit disconnected because we're involved in the distress of it, if not consciously, we are annoyed, we're frustrated. So this is a type of reaction to what I've been through today. For example, if you have your really tight shoulders from working all day in the office, or no, let's say have an argument with someone at work, and that will typically cause tension in a person's neck. Conflict in relationships typically causes a tension in the neck area. And you've not let that go, or you may have let it go mentally, but it's still there as a tension and a pain in your neck, which shows you haven't really fully got past it. It's not fully resolved. It's still had an effect on you. You might have let go of it mentally, but the effect it has is still there. So what I'm getting at is that effect will mean that you won't be you'll be more susceptible to injury there. Not simply because it's tight, but because of why it's tight. And this is a hard thing for people to get. It's not super important, but I'm just chucking a few things in there to begin with.
Yeah, it makes sense, because I think it's like you're alluding to the point, correct me if I'm wrong here,
Please do,
that
yeah.
you need to be really tuning into the body more and feeling more, so that you are very conscious of what your body is trying to tell you, and you're listening to that.
Yeah, you're listening to that in the sense that in the instant that your body is not comfortable or feels a bit out of balance, if you are in your body, you're going to be there, you're going to know that. Yeah. But if you're not quite there in yourself, if you're distracted or you're thinking a lot or you're listening to music or whatever, and you go off with something there and you're still doing your thing, you've got more chance of disconnecting. But to take it further, so let's say that disconnection is a massive problem in people in general, that they're quite disconnected. Like we've been sitting here for a couple of hours now. It's pretty easy, or an hour and something now. It's easy to not notice how we're feeling in our bum and our legs because we're sitting on it. It's easy to get quite involved in the mental interaction. Yeah. But if we are also feeling how it's going through our tensions in our body, sitting here for so long, if we're feeling that, what that will enable is for those tensions to process. Whereas if we're not feeling that, we tend to, like you're on a computer all day, you tend to lose touch with your physicality. And this is where tension builds up. You don't even notice it. So when you're feeling the tension, it processes. When you're not feeling it, it can't move. It gets stuck there. And then you come back into connection with it and it starts to process. But I'm jumping around. I'll just come back to the pain you see, because a very important question you asked about between trauma and just any old pain. Any old pain all the way through to trauma. Trauma is just an extreme end of it. Yeah? But our habit of our relationship with pain being, and with our bodies being quite disconnected, we are not automatically, the natural state in which we're in our bodies fully, even if we're thinking and talking, but we're not numb to our physicality, then there's so much information and so many different things, so many different sensations going on that are processing all the time on the introspective level of the living organism that we are. And to be fully integrated with that, it makes a huge difference to how we are at the end of the day, or a huge difference to how we are at the end of a situation. Because it enables because we're aware of that sensation, we are feeling it, and in that processing it. And in the other way is to be aware of that sensation. You are having to you're having to stay grounded in your body at a feeling level. Therefore, you're unable to go so fast mentally. So what happens is when you go fast mentally, disconnect from your body, and you get a bit of stress and a bit of tension, and you don't feel it and you don't notice it, that stress and that tension, or pain especially, will provide more agitation, create more agitation in the body, which drives your activity and your thinking faster again. So, or if you're in conflict with someone and you're not feeling the conflict effect on you physically, then you get more fired up in your body. And the more you get fired up in anxiety, the more enraged and confused you become in your thinking, the more reactionary, and the more it flares the fight between the two people. So there's no correction mode. So when we're disconnected from the body, we don't have the intelligence of the body guiding us. There's no automatic correction. We get out of balance.
And so you believe that through meditation, and it's a different type of meditation, I suppose, to what other people might think in terms of, well, there are different types of meditation out there, but your approach to meditation is how you help people to be able to learn to stay connected to their body and to heal that trauma. Walk us through how that works.
Yeah, exactly. So this is why I've produced the app, undoapp.com, which is what I'd encourage everybody who wants to go into their healing process is to use that app as a general foundation of many of the things I'm talking about, because you need to learn a bit more about how you function as a human organism. You need to understand more about what it really means to feel as opposed to emotionalize your feelings. If you don't really understand how to feel, this is an example, if you don't really understand how to feel without emotionalizing, then when pain comes up or distress comes up and you add the story to it, you react to it mentally, then you actually make it overwhelming and you cause yourself pain and suffering that isn't or actually automatically there. It's the result of your reactionary thinking. Yeah.
So is that what you mean by emotionalizing it?
That's what I mean by emotionalizing it. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that you shouldn't feel like when you had all that trauma coming out of you, there would have been an idea, you would have seen it as being very emotional because it was memory of an emotional time, but you weren't being emotional, I would say. You weren't being a drama queen. This was just coming out of you and taking you over. So that's the body crying. When the body cries, there's no story attached much. Yeah. It's a pure healing process. Yeah. There might be the story coming out with the feelings, but you're not fighting. You're not creating a story in reaction to the feelings. When you're purging and it's coming straight out of your body, like what you were talking about, there would have been just an outpouring that you were trying to keep up with. So this is feelings. This is not you making something happen. This is something happening from the inside out. When we emotionalize, we add from the outside in. So we think about our feelings. Oh, I don't like feeling sad. Oh, I wish this, fair enough. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that, but if you do that, especially if you're going to go into a healing process, all the people listening, you need to learn to understand what the difference is, so you can recognize what's going on, so you don't become confused between what you think. Oh, am I just emotionalizing? Oh, I'm not supposed to emotionalize. And you need to be able to discern between. Oh no, I'm just feeling. Yeah, and essentially how to get back to that is always bring it back to purely the sensations in your body, and drop. And don't be concerned about what your thinking is telling you or saying.
Okay.
Don't put importance on that.
Yeah. So You suggested before we started that one of the ways we could help people is to actually walk through a little bit of a mini meditation as part of
Right.
the wrap up for our conversation. I think that might be quite useful. Now, we've talked quite a lot about trauma. We've talked a lot about the impacts of sexual abuse and domestic violence and so on. And so it'd be really lovely to help people to, I suppose, leave on a positive note, and wrap up with a meditation in terms of how you can help people with the trauma and a taste of what you offer. So would you be open to doing that with
Absolutely.
myself? Yeah.
No, for sure.
I'm just
But
going to turn the aircon off. But yeah.
The one thing I didn't do was I think I'll just jump back to one thing, was that when you say, how would I help people? When I get them into, I didn't actually finish it properly, and this is probably important. I say, how do you help people? How would I help people? Is once they're in touch, help them get in touch with their pain, because the pain's there. I'm working with the pain that's in them. And then it's like I'm able to coax that persona, that memory self out forward in them.
Mm-hmm.
So this enables them to, it's like in the process of working with them, I'm able to gently coax that out. I attune to it pretty quickly, and I help coax that out, and it tends to just come out. And as I attune to it and it starts to come forward, then two things happen. One is the feeling of the pain that's in them starts to increase in a way in which it's an outpouring, like you said with your healing. But the other thing that tends to happen, is I guide them as they go through that, to help them also connect with what's happening in that memory. So the cognition of what happened at the same time is generally fairly easy to help them recognize that is happening at the same time, because it is. It's just that people don't know how to see it. Meaning that when that pain is pouring out of you, there's a lot of information coming out, cognitive information coming out at the same time. But you're so overwhelmed with the pain that you don't necessarily get the details. And what I help people do is help them slow it down, calm it down, slow it down, and let it come out at a pace that they can actually recognize the details of what's going on in the situation, so that they can put what they're feeling together with what happened. Now, it's got to be the exact memory, because you can't otherwise you just make up anything and say that's why you feel that way. It doesn't make any difference. What happens in a person is quite interesting. When they're feeling distress, and it actually does connect with, you probably relate to this, actually does connect with a knowing, a cognitive knowing that occurs to them. And it's the memory in the body that they can't deny, because that's happening of its own volition. Yeah? Whereas the thinking they can question, they can doubt, they can resist, they can deny. Yeah?
It's easy to do that, yeah.
Very easy to do that, and very easy to doubt yourself at that point. That couldn't have happened. Yeah, especially when it's a brand new memory. Yeah. So what I help them stay with, is how that is happening along with this. I don't put it together for them. I help them see what they already do know in their body, but their thinking, resistance, and distrust in themselves is preventing them from recognizing. And as that allows the thoughts that are happening to connect with the feelings they're having. And that really gives them a tremendous relief to actually know where they've never known anything. To actually go, I'm not crazy. This is for real. This has happened to me. And then, as I always say to them afterwards, if you find yourself doubting what you remembered, always come back to, you know how you felt in your body. You know that was real. Yeah. And over a few sessions, they start to break down their distrust in their own internal process. And they begin to be able to recognize, as you said, is this just pain, or is this pain with a trauma attached to it? So rather than analysing it from the outside in, I help them get to the pain and then get in touch with the pain in a healthy way and start feeling the pain, which then brings with it the cognitive memory that on their own they often won't recognise as happening. I help them slow them down. I literally hold the person. It doesn't matter whether it's on internet or physically with me or away from me. I hold the person. I feel what they're going through. I sense what they're going through. I just hold them there. I know exactly, after a while, I know exactly what they're going through. Not that I tell them that. I let them find out for themselves, but I will guide them. As in, slow down, what you just missed there. You come back to that, and I help them see, or something they skipped around because it was too frightening. I coax them back and help them see it so they can fully go through the process of that one event. And there's, most people, there's going to be dozens of hundreds of events if they've been through childhood traumas, childhood abuse. In most people, I would say, with the split personality situation, that always means there's been a lot of events. Yeah. So they will heal. And every time they heal an event, one thing happens is they get a relief of that particular feeling from inside of them because they can process that. The other is they start to put their life back together again. They start to put themselves back together with a part of themselves that they never been able to make contact with. They're now starting to make contact with it again. And then I help them understand how to live. In that same session, I'll start to teach them or educate them how to live with that party instead of losing contact with it again. Inevitably, they will lose contact with it, but I help them understand how to start staying in contact with that, because that's most important. That they start to live with that part of themselves in a knowing sense, not just as something harassing them on the inside. So it's quite a skill that I have to do that. And what we've touched on today in regards to trauma, really we're just touching the surface, but that's okay.
And that's amazing, though, because, we've been speaking for over 2 hours, and the fact that we're only just touching the surface,
it's a big thing. There's a lot.
Yeah.
I've got a series coming out that I did with a friend on all the different types of trauma. And we thought, we'll just do this maybe, we ended up with 10 hours of talk, yeah? And we've broken up into seven sections, like a course. And I have that coming out. It's a conversation. It's similar to a podcast, if you like a good question, but it was more orchestrated to make sure we covered the points specific to create a flow. It was an orchestrated podcast, if you like, but but it was, interview. It was a good way of doing it, and that'll be coming out within the month. I'll make that available on my Undo app, or through my undoapp.com, and I'll also make that available through our website, or the app's on our website as well.
Yeah.
So
we'll pop that in the show notes for people.
Yeah, it'll be good for people. There's a lot there that not everybody's going to, I even talk about the gender confusion that people are getting caught up in today. That's a current problem. And so that's an area that not everybody's going to need or be interested in. But these are split up into different topics so people can know what they're going to get from each one. So that's available, or soon to be available. But coming back to what you're saying about the meditation, we're going to do the meditation, but this is why I say if you start with the body, it's a hell of an adjustment. As you can see, every time we've talked about this, you may have noticed, you naturally go back to questioning it from a thought-based perspective. And I'm not saying, and that's not wrong. That's totally 100% how as a human being, we have learnt to function. And what I'm doing is I've flipped that. What happened for me as a monk, during that period as a monk, I got flipped on my head. And then I realised this is a natural way of functioning. I've been able to function that way since, or I have not been able to function that way since, where it's very much, even when I'm talking, it's very much based on sensation-based. Everything is here in me. When you ask me questions, it's like this for anyone, they just don't realise. You ask someone a question as a podcaster, and you trigger the information that's in them.
Yeah.
You're triggering it. They didn't have to sit there and think about it. It just starts to happen. Yeah. And you can't stop them talking, because you've triggered something that wants to come out.
Yes.
But it's there in them as a sensation.
Mm.
And this is something that we can talk a lot more on in the future, and people will understand a lot more about if they do. I really encourage them. I'm not trying to sell the app, but the reason I'm trying to get people to use it, it's not just selling the app. It's cheap anyway, but it's not that. It's that I want to give people the opportunity of a foundation. And there's like 14 chapters in that app, and there's heaps of podcasts and a lot of other things in there that are related to what they need. There's also around the mind-body connection, what I call body tension translator, so people can start to look up if they get problems in a certain part of their body. They don't really quite understand what the psychological or emotional connection might be. They can refer to this section in the app that links all this together for them, just to give them an indication of what might be going on for them.
So give us a couple of examples, Matthew.
Like, for example, you might look up, let's say someone has pain in the... Oh, yeah, we didn't talk about this at all today, did we? My years as a masseur. That's all right. If someone has pain in their middle back, let's say. A lot of people have pain in their middle back. And I'll say, okay, which side is it in? Oh, it's the left side. Okay. So it's right behind your heart there, behind the chest and lungs and heart area. And it's pain in your middle back. And when you sit quietly and meditate, these are the sorts of things that you start to notice, which you don't notice when you're doing stuff all day. And so I say, okay, what is that pain in your middle back? Why would I have tension there? Just on that one side or the other side. It's specific. And I found this out through all my work working with people's bodies. I discovered how we hold different specific information in different areas. So in the back of the heart there, the pain in the left side, I was saying, hey, here, when they look that up, they'll find out that, this is where you're holding some tension around heartbreak or being hurt. But you've pushed that to the back of your mind. You've pushed that to the background, and it's stuck there in the back of your heart as a tension that needs attention that you haven't given any attention to since it's probably happened, or over the time it happened so much you just couldn't cope with it. And if it's on the left side, it's probably the effects of, well, not probably, it'll be the effects from a female in your life. If it's on the right side, it'll be the effects from a male in your life, for example. And so it gives people, okay, when I'm working on people, it's very clear. If I'm massaging someone's body, the information flows from them. Or I might say about, you've heard of things like, someone's a pain in the neck, or you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. So if someone looks up shoulders, I've always got so much tension in my shoulders. If I look that up, I'll be talking about how their characteristics. This is indicating that their characteristic is to take on more responsibility than that's really their own. So they're taking on the responsibility for other people all the time. And that's why your body's getting stressed in the shoulders, because it can handle the responsibility that's yours, but it can't handle the other 50 people in your life, or the other one person in your life. So
I'm smiling because that one resonates with me, because that's my problem area all the time.
Yeah. Okay. So the right shoulder. Yeah. So it's like, so there is a stress that you carry in respect to a man. Not that it's wrong, he's bad. But
it's right across. It's right across.
It's right
the
across. So,
right
okay.
across.
Yeah. So you carry a lot of people with your work, and the type of work you do is very, very full on. I'm talking about your corporate work now. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty damn full on. So you are looked to as, well, it's your responsibility. You've got to make this right. You've got to make us work well together. So you go, holy shit, that's a pretty big responsibility. because there's a lot of other problems in the way. So that, and all the way through sexual, when we talk about sexual trauma, where do you're going to feel the most disturbance when that part of your body is physically touched. Yeah, that is where you're going to. So there, where you've got problems in this area, or stress, or ongoing reoccurring problems in this area, then you would be drawn in. If you look that up in the app, you'll learn a bit more about what that will be related to for you. And there's about 70 individual meditation guidances for all the body parts in there as well.
Amazing.
And they're not intellectually formed.
Yeah.
They're actually relevant to people, but you can get a bit intellectually caught up in that stuff. And so I make it a part of the whole course. It's a good indicator, but what's very important, it's only an indicator. Your pain in your back is going to be related to, if it's in the middle of the back, yeah, sure, there's going to be pain in the back of your heart somewhere. But exactly how it plays out for you as you get to the bottom of that, as you heal that, will be unique to you and your life. Yeah, so it's you. I want the individual to learn how to do this, to listen to their own body, but they need a little bit of guidance. I want them to be able to do that for themselves. So I think that's important if they want to do that. That gives them a foundation and they can use that for a long time. There's a lot of stuff in there, but it's a course that will give them a really good foundation for dealing with and handling what they may try to do on their own, or if they can afford to, and if anything's stirred up for anyone, I'm available online, and I can work very sensitively and very effectively online or in person if you live in the southwest of Australia. So that is something you just need to, you'll get it in the show notes at the bottom.
Yeah, so, absolutely. And thank you for offering that, because I think that this is a lot of what we've discussed today is sensitive to people and can trigger people. And so if people have been triggered or impacted by our conversation today, then it is important to reach out to someone like Matthew to get some support for that.
It's very important. I'm making a priority from the podcast. If anybody is triggered and struggling with it, this meditation is the sort of thing. We're going to have a meditation now, just for you to what to do with those feelings, very practically. But then, of course, reach out and meet. I'm available. I'll make myself. You'll get the support you need, but some of you will prefer just to start with the app and take it slowly, and maybe one day come on one of my meditation retreats if you go that far. So, but it's important. I'm glad you said that, because it is a sensitive topic. People need to reach out, and having been any disturbance from what I've talked about, then I'm available for sure.
Fabulous.
Yeah, so
thank you, Matthew. All right, so let's do this little mini meditation.
Yeah,
walk us through
mini meditation.
And I suppose we should just caveat this around that if you were driving, I'm assuming they shouldn't do this if they're driving or doing any sort of, like, if you're on a bike or something like that, maybe not do it. I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, they won't space out. Okay. I have more faith in human intelligence than that. Maybe it's too much faith.
Well, you don't want people closing their eyes. That's what I'm assuming if you're driving.
Yeah, right? No, exactly. Yeah, you're right. And everybody usually says this. So, you probably, if you're driving or you're active right now, it's probably better to find a place, pull over, and sit quietly in the seat of your car, or listen to the podcast when you get home, and just listen to it again and get the meditation when you're sitting still. But for those of you who are listening, and we'll go straight into this, for those of you who are listening, it doesn't really matter if your eyes are open or closed. But for those of you who are listening, as we go on, you may feel the urge just to close your eyes, and that's perfectly fine. But the main thing we're doing here is, yes, as Azra was saying, there's many approaches to meditation, but this is the only truly body-based, inside-out approach to meditation that I know of. And I've been in the business for 45 years, and I know what goes on out there in this area, so I'd say I'm probably correct. And that is the meditation where you simply You are not trying to do anything about the state you're in. The only problem with the state you're in right now is that you're not truly in it. The only problem with the state that you are in right now is that you are not fully in it, that you are, to some degree, disconnected from it. And when I say you, I want to make this very straightforward and simple. I mean you, the living organism, the body of you. Your thinking is not important. You just let that go on in the background. That doesn't matter at all. At this point, all you're needing and all I'm wanting you to do is to discover this very foundation of this approach to healing and meditation. And that is to simply be physically still. And this is a common thing to most meditations. Be physically still. But then I don't want you to then start doing something like using a meditation technique. Not this time. I want you to let your thinking drift into the background and just sit physically still. And the only thing wrong with your condition is that you're not truly in it. The reason you suffer your condition is because you're not fully in that condition. And what I mean by that is to fully feel the condition you're in right now. I don't want you to change that condition. I want you to allow your condition within your own body to simply show itself. And I want that, however you feel, throughout your body, I want that to just come forward automatically in its own time. And all you're doing is sitting still and considering yourself, that possibly you are this living body, that possibly you are nothing but this body. Your thinking is not you. It's just an activity. So what remains is what you know. You know your body exists. But how do you know that? How do you know your backside is pressing on the cushion or the seat? How do you know your arms are there? You know these things because you can feel them, because your backside is alive. It's a part of the living organism of you. Your arms are alive. They too are part of the whole being of you. Because they are alive, you can't not feel them. Is there any part of your body that you can manage to not feel? Just give your body the time it needs, and it will begin to come alive in a way that shows you what you're feeling, shows you your condition. This meditation is absolutely unique to every single one of you because it's all about you. It's not about a state to reach. It's all about the one you're already in. And you will be feeling different to me. Each one of us are uniquely in our own condition. And it's your condition that's important to you. My condition that's important to me. Don't concern yourself with the thinking. Just feel. Feel the sensations that you feel all day, every day, but don't realize you do. You always feel your feet. You always feel your legs. You always feel all of you. But you distract into so much thinking that you can't feel you. So right now, if there's any distress that has come up through our discussion today, if anything has upset you, frightened you, disrupted you, find where that feeling is in your body. Which part of your body has been affected by our conversation? Just feeling any disturbance or any disruption, wherever it is, exactly where it is in your body. Keep feeling it and see what happens. There's nothing wrong with the condition you're in. It's just that you need to be fully in it. You're not trying to achieve anything because you're already here and as you are. And that's the interest. That's the purpose of sitting still for you right now, is to find out from within yourself, in the feeling of yourself, exactly how it is to be you right now. And let that you, that body of you, come alive. Just let your body take care of whatever feelings are there. Don't intervene mentally, but continue to feel the way you do. And this will enable your body to process those feelings we have triggered. So whenever you find yourself struggling with how it is to be you, there is no escape from you. And there's no way your struggle is going to really help. So rather than struggling to not be you or to not feel the way you do, turn that around and fully feel where that feeling or those sensations are in your body. Just feel for the purpose of knowing exactly how you are today. Knowing yourself today. And giving yourself this time to recover. So whenever you become distressed, just sit with that. Find a quiet place if you can. Or find a quiet place in your own body. Just sit with what you're feeling. And see what your body does with that. Okay. You okay?
Yeah, I'm good.
Oh, good.
Feeling heavy, and yeah, just coming back out of that. I'm sure I'm not the only one, but
Yeah,
that was
good.
that was really calming for me.
Yeah. The thing that calms us down is to stop trying to be different and start letting ourselves be the way we are, even if we're not comfortable with it.
Yeah.
And that's when we start to calm down.
Yeah, for sure.
Because when we're trying to be different, we're sort of attacking ourselves for the way we are, but not meaning to, but we sort of are. So we need to let ourselves be the way we are sometimes, even if it doesn't feel very good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that was lovely. Thank you so much.
That was my pleasure. Thank you for your time.
Look, likewise, a really great conversation, Matthew. Thank you so much for your time today. I think you bring a lot of value to all of our listeners, and I'm sure that there will be many people out there that will have taken at least something away from our conversation today. And as we discussed already, for those that are wanting some more information regarding how they can get some further help from Matthew, then we'll pop those details in the show notes. So Matthew, thank you so much again for joining us today.
Pleasure. See you soon.
Well, that's a wrap for today's podcast. Thank you for tuning in. And if you'd like to learn more about biohacking, go ahead and sign up on my website at www.biohack-her.com to get a free copy of my 5 top biohacks to get you kick-started. While you're there, you can also check out my blog page for more tips on biohacking. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, you can do so on Apple, Spotify, and Google Play. Let us know if there's anyone you'd like us to talk to in particular, and we'll endeavour to get them on the podcast. Until next time, remember to live well longer.